Now, Doctor, I'm here to talk to you about a man. A very dangerous and a very unstable man.
If you're looking for a drink in South Philadelphia, you might encounter Dennis Reynolds. Now, on the face of it, you might think he's normal, personable, perhaps even charming. But behind his forced smile and layers of concealer resides one of the most insidiously twisted minds to ever stalk the streets of Philly. A man with no moral compass, who not only exclusively pursues his own interests, but takes pleasure in the pain he inflicts on others. Like any narcissist, Dennis's foundational assumption is that he's always the smartest and most attractive person in any room he walks into. And if anyone dares to challenge this perception, he'll unleash his own brand of psychological warfare until order is restored. This way he can feel safe and validate that he's still a cut above the rest. But Dennis is only the smartest person in the room because he chooses to surround himself with idiots he can easily manipulate. As Sinclair Lewis put it, every man is a king so long as he has someone to look down on.
To be in someone's mind, to have complete control.
But over the course of the series, we witness Dennis's predatorial instincts in action. He has a knack for deception, understanding how to use appearances to lure his victims into a false sense of security. But is Dennis the manipulative mastermind he perceives himself to be, or just an empty shell of a human trying to give himself the illusion of control in a world of chaos? So let's take a deeper look at how Dennis Reynolds manipulates everyone over the course of 16 seasons of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Now, before we break down his cunning schemes, we need to understand the psychology of the character. Dennis was raised by Barbara and Frank, who, although not his biological father, was financially successful enough to make life comfortable for the family. And Dennis then confused his position in the world with what his father could afford to give him. For instance, he received an Ivy League education, which allows him to feel as if he's entitled to more respect and authority than those who didn't. In his mind, he was born to be elite.
But sweetie, being a winner is not something that you can become, it's something that you're kind of born with, like me.
Dennis is a twin, and was therefore thrust into competition from the moment he was born. Who was going to be the favourite, the successful one, the winner? But he quickly realised that in order to appear victorious, he didn't actually need to achieve anything. He just needed to keep his sister down whenever she threatened his status. We see this with how he consistently mocks her, and even intentionally throws her off when they go bowling, getting it into her head that she can't hit a single pin whenever he says gutter ball. Now, this only all started because Dee obviously had real potential. She was actually the captain of the girls' bowling team before he sabotaged her. But this competitive streak and need to undermine others would not end with his sister. Dennis will do anything to preserve his status as number one, which is why when Charlie reveals that Mac is his best friend, not Dennis, he then goes out of his way to prove that Mac is actually a bad friend to Charlie because he's secretly sleeping with the waitress behind his back. And Charlie has always tragically viewed the waitress as his soulmate. However, all the while, Dennis still acknowledges that he and Mac are actually best friends, but he doesn't mind keeping Charlie down at number 2 as long as he's perceived as being his number 1. Everything is a competition to Dennis. No matter how much work someone has put in to earn their status, he'll still automatically place himself above them. Oh, you're a trained psychologist. Well, Dennis actually minored in psychology at his superior Ivy League college, so I guess he's the real brains of the operation. And the list goes on. He believes he could easily direct the movie of his memoirs without any film experience. Why shouldn't he be the model for the billboard, instead of an actual model? And when he sees the Asian waitress likes Charlie more, no, this can't be right. She just hasn't seen him with his shirt off yet. He always has to be the star. As if he isn't at the very least the hottest and smartest of his inner circle, then what even is he? Just another loser who co-owns an unsuccessful bar in Philadelphia? No, that doesn't make sense. It's not how the world is meant to be. Which is why whenever Dennis faces rejection or falls short, his fragile ego can't take it. And for a man who thinks of himself as the pinnacle of desire, he gets rejected a lot.
I'm an attractive man.
Despite skipping meals, enduring face peels, and dyeing his hair to appear chiseled and youthful, he still gets rejected by his teenage prom date, Mac's mom, Charlie's mom, even his sister when he begs her to take him to Hollywood with her when he thinks she's on the verge of stardom, as well as a long list of women he attempts to date. When he attends group dates, he assumes this is an environment he'll naturally thrive in. But when he discovers that these women can submit online ratings of their date and rate him a pathetic 1 star, he crumbles and becomes obsessed with artificially increasing his rating to reflect his perception of reality, even targeting less attractive women to seduce to get his numbers up. He can't possibly pause and reflect on what negative qualities these women might be seeing in him and change for the better, because the truth doesn't matter to Dennis. He understands that in the public's mind, perception is reality, which is why he tries so desperately to control it, failing to realize that this obsessive controlling behaviour is what everyone is so repulsed by to begin with. For instance, when he tries to bring women back to the bar to lock down for the storm, once they reveal they have boyfriends, he snaps, realizing all of his efforts have been in vain. So as a reaction to that completely legitimate rejection, he ends up writing a controlling contract for any invited guests to sign that insists they do not have a boyfriend, will act easygoing, and never reject his advances. This is actually an interesting insight into how Dennis's mind works. Most people would have just taken the rejection in stride, or possibly even reflected on their behaviour and adapted for the future, whereas his only instinct is to become more controlling and less empathetic, as the only way he knows how to protect his fragile ego is by oppressing others. For the most part, we tend to judge how good a person is based on how they treat others, especially when there's nothing in it for them. But kindness is a foreign language to Dennis. He's only fluent in self-interest. If they can make more money selling alcohol to minors, then he thinks they should water down the product and jack up the price. If he can make more money on welfare, he'll quit his job, even if it means he has to become addicted to crack to qualify for the payments. If there's a jumper on the bar roof, and it just might be more profitable for him to die than be saved, he'll start scheming up ways for him to fall rather than helping his fellow man. He'll never do anything that doesn't benefit him, whether it's with money, fame, sex, or inflating his ego, which I'm aware might already make him sound like a terrible person. But we haven't even begun to investigate the most manipulative and cruel things Dennis has ever done. Narcissists with fragile egos never forget who slighted them, so every affliction, whether intended or not, demands retaliation. For instance, let's say you're in a bar and someone shushes you and your friends. Rude, right? Now you might make a joke of it, mock them, or just take the hint to be less obnoxiously loud. What you wouldn't do is obsess about it until you decide to track down the individual so you can shush them to their face. And then when you can't find them, file a false police report so you can get a police sketch artist to draw up an accurate illustration of what they look like for you to search with. But for Dennis, once he needs to rebalance his insecurities, every deception is perfectly justified as long as it gets him closer to his goal. Now imagine someone slept with your prom date when you were a teenager. That's a bummer. But over time, the more you mature, the less it hurts, as you would start to recognize how silly and superficial those times were. But not for Dennis. To him, it doesn't matter if it was 20 years ago, it's still fresh. So once he goes to his high school reunion, he tries to sleep with Tim Murphy's wife to get his revenge. Because words like engaged or married don't mean anything to Dennis, as he hasn't got the emotional depth to understand the significance of a spouse in comparison to a date. Because even if no one else remembers it that way, Dennis believes he was a golden god in high school, and this is the singular stain on his record that needs to be corrected. And anyway, he's better than Tim, and surely his wife will realize that once he lays his seductive charms on her. She won't just think he's gay or anything. But Dennis's compulsion to seek sexual revenge does not end there. When he hears Max slept with his mom, it's tit for tat. So he needs to balance the books by trying to sleep with his mom. And then when Dennis believes Charlie is coercing his twin, he tries to sleep with his mom. But this whole game of tit for tat only began because Dennis believes he's too elite to have to do the same grunt work around the bar as everyone else. So in order to blackmail his supposed friend, he takes out the waitress in front of him, threatening to sleep with her unless Charlie agrees to take on his workload. This is a perfect dynamic for Dennis, as it reinforces how attractive and intelligent he is in a single move, as he knows how much the waitress wants him and how much Charlie wants her. So he can be the sadistic puppet master in the middle, controlling everything to his advantage. The sick part is, in Dennis's depraved mind, the waitress isn't even a person. She's just a pawn, necessary collateral damage to complete his mission. So when she tells him she wants to take it slow because she likes him so much, he now risks losing control over the situation, so decides to up the ante and tell her he loves her. Meaning he's willing to lead her on, sleep with her, and ghost her just to hurt Charlie. All because he thinks he's too good to do grunt work. But semi-luckily for her, Charlie calls to concede just before he seals the deal. So now Dennis has to backtrack, saying she was right and they should take it slow, before inevitably abandoning her. So her feelings, Charlie's feelings, they're all just playthings for someone as selfish as Dennis. But none of this is unusual for Dennis. It's his MO, it's what he does.
You need years of practice to even sniff my talent for manipulation.
And although you'd think after treating the waitress so badly that she'd want nothing to do with him, later on in the series, when he wants to get a job in the bar she manages, he successfully flirts with her to get what he wants, trusting that despite what he's done, she still wants to please him. But why? Well, unfortunately, Dennis has perfected a system that allows him to emotionally manipulate women in such a way that no matter how badly he treats them, they'll always take him back. It's called the Dennis system, and there are symptoms of each sadistic step throughout the series. The D stands for demonstrate value, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. We all communicate our values without even thinking about it. What's messed up is that Dennis doesn't have any values, so he has to make them up. Whether it's filling a prescription for his fake grandmother, pretending to know a dead man so he can tell stories about him to his granddaughter, or bringing a leash to a group date to pretend he has a rescue waiting outside. All of these deceptions paint a picture of a man who cares for other people, who's trustworthy, safe and kind. The E stands for engage physically, which is a normal aspect of forming a romantic connection. But again, Dennis has to twist the situation to his advantage. It goes like this. He gives the appearance of knowing an exclusive restaurant that doesn't take bookings. And then when they go there to eat, oh no, it's closed, as he knows it's always closed on Sundays. This allows him to offer up a cheaper option, like grabbing a pizza and going to his apartment. Now, if he had proposed this up front, she probably would have said no, let's meet somewhere public. But because she's already made time specifically for this date, she's more likely to say yes, as it feels like it's happening naturally. Once she's in his home, Mac is meant to pretend he's too scared to go in his room as he saw a spider. So if they want to be alone, they'll have to watch a movie in Dennis's room, where he can easily make the move. So he's manufactured a situation where he doesn't need to progress through all of the trustworthy steps to get her to agree to come back to his bedroom. Instead, he's just starting at the finish line. Now that she's physically attached to him, he progresses to N, nurture dependency, which is where things go from sleazy to sociopathic. Any normal relationship involves a degree of dependency, forming a connection that bonds you to the other person. But Dennis doesn't know how to do that authentically, so instead he'll slash her tires so she depends on him for rides, or make threatening phone calls to her from a payphone so that she's so scared that she needs him to come over to feel safe in her own home. So you see, he twists his victim's perception of the world to make their life harder, just so he can make it better as the knight in shining armor, before he then disappears. Which leads us to the next N, neglect emotionally. After making himself the most important person in her life, he vanishes, leaving behind a huge emotional hole that he used to fill. He won't answer calls, he'll cancel plans, leaving them to wonder what went wrong and begin to question their self-worth, before unexpectedly showing up in their life again for I, inspire hope, where he now explains his absence and gives them a comforting narrative to live in, that he only ran away because he was scared of getting hurt as they were getting too close, but now he realizes he loves them and needs them and wants to be with them. essentially mirroring the final act of a romance movie where the avoidant character overcomes their fears and fights for love, leading to them rekindling their romance in one incredibly powerful moment. Now at this point, the victim believes they're finally at the end of the roller coaster. The ups and downs have been intense, but now relief has finally kicked in. They can breathe. Before he completes his system with S, Separate Entirely, where he ghosts them once again. This is why Dennis believes he can return to these women at any time, because he's forced them to experience something so intense that they've bonded to him. And he's also cleverly laid the foundation that whenever he returns, it's because now he's finally ready for something real. And given they already believe he's a good guy from the demonstrating value at the beginning, and all the good deeds he's done for them along the way, they're more likely to give him another shot. Because in their mind, it's all been unfolding naturally, not realizing that it's actually been engineered by a sick puppet master. Uncertainty is actually a really important part of dating, as not knowing if it will go well or not makes you appreciate it more when things finally click, as now you're aware it doesn't always go that way. But for someone with such a fragile ego, Dennis can't stand the possibility of rejection, and therefore tries to create situations where his dates will feel compelled into doing what he wants. This trait is exposed when they get a boat, and Dennis expresses to Mac that the whole point of buying a boat was so that any women he brings back to it will worry about what might happen to her if she says no, given there's nowhere to run and there's nothing but ocean for miles.
Because of the implication.
Mac had simply assumed that the women might like him and just enjoy the novelty of being out on a boat. But Dennis always looks at it from the darkest possible angle. That after consuming so many horror movies and books, on some level she will feel coerced to say yes, as she's in a potentially dangerous situation. Even though he swears he would never actually do anything, he still likes to know that he has this psychological leverage in his back pocket. But Dennis doesn't just think about how to manipulate women into falling in love with him. He also comes up with a system for attracting men, which he teaches to Dee and Mac. This system is completely different. It's about taking a back seat and letting the man feel wanted and needed. Suppress your instincts to brag or look good. Instead, you inflate his ego and need his power by telling him you need his strength to open a bottle of ketchup. Then you take it all away from him by negating his power, so he fears losing his position on the pedestal you've just built for him. This will bring out his competitive side, and he'll want to prove he's more worthy than any other man you've dated before. You then comfort him by subtly engaging physically, and close by asking, "Do you want a tissue?" As according to Dennis, this psychological ploy will teleport the man back to when he was a child and start to view you as his mommy, the person he's apparently been seeking validation from his whole life. Now, this suggests that all of Dennis's manipulative games, narcissism, and fear of rejection stems from his lack of unconditional love as a child, despite being the obvious favourite. That he fears being rejected by a woman, any woman, because it reminds him of how his own mother's love and reassurance could be taken away at a moment's notice, thus creating this need to control so that he always comes out on top. An Oedipus complex for the ages. So when it comes to creating a system for attracting men, Dennis can't remove his own desires from the equation, as he believes he's the perfect man, and therefore whatever he needs, surely every other man will also succumb to. But Dennis has a strange dynamic with men too, as his best friend Mac is arguably in love with him. And this is actually perfect for Dennis, as it cements yet another imbalanced relationship where he always feels desired. He can also take advantage of Mac's inferior mind to manipulate him. For example, when he wants Mac to stop eating his Thin Mints, he doesn't just ask him to stop like a normal person. Instead, he preys on his insecurities by creating a newsletter about kicking ass and being masculine, which quickly transforms into a cult. And like any cult leader, Dennis only targets simple-minded souls who are searching for something, as this, once again, makes him feel like a god. This way he can use the cult's rules to control Mac whenever he falters. Just look at this exchange. "I notice you're looking a little out of shape there, bud." "I am." So he instantly puts Mac on the back foot and triggers his insecurities. Yeah, and it's a shame because you've been looking so great lately, so sexy. I was. So now he's rewarding him for his previous behaviour to incentivize him to go back to it. Yeah, so to see this is just disappointing. To me. This disappoints you? Yeah, so what are you doing? You taking a day off or something? I'm sure the master allows for that though, right? Well, I'm not really sure about that. So he lowers Mac's self-esteem and then beats him over the head with the rules of his newsletter, knowing that Mac is religious and has always craved his validation. So not only is he letting himself and Dennis down, but he's also breaking the rules of his new belief system. All of these mental games just so he'll stop eating his Thin Mints. But Dennis doesn't stop there. He also catfishes Mac with a fake boyfriend Johnny just so he can get him to buy his favourite soft-shell crab. And even secretly drugs Mac with diet pills just because he thought it was gross to see him looking so fat. So even his alleged best friend, who's secretly in love with him, is treated like just another pawn to make everything around Dennis work the way he wants. His desires come first, and the emotional well-being of others comes... well, actually it doesn't. By now it's safe to assume that Dennis Reynolds is a creep, but there are even more layers to his sadistic deception. He records and catalogues all of his conquests without their knowledge, even giving them a star rating, which he hypocritically cannot bear when it's done to him. But perhaps due to the fact he was always in competition with his sister from the moment he was born, Dennis has not just elevated himself up to being above D, but being above all women, considering them inferior, which is on full display when the boys go up against the girls in bowling, and he goes on a misogynistic rant about why women will never be as good as men. This brazen attitude is a quick shortcut that allows him to rule out half of the population as beneath him. And if they're not physically attractive, at least in his eyes, then they basically have no say on the matter, as they're already losers and he was born and bred to be a winner.
And winners, we don't listen to words like no or don't or stop.
Consent isn't something he can naturally achieve, so he has to psychologically and even physically trap his victims to feed his ego. This is why he instinctively goes for younger women, as they're less experienced in dealing with a narcissist like him. But what's most disturbing is that Dennis doesn't consider anything he does wrong. As in the Time's Up episode, he reveals that he doesn't believe it's possible for a good-looking man to harass a woman, as they'll always just interpret anything creepy as charming. And as we've covered, Dennis considers himself the most attractive man of all. So all of his superficial beliefs protect him from self-judgment. But for those that are ugly, he suggests that if they don't want to get in trouble, they can't get sloppy. This is why he keeps tapes, timestamps, and receipts, confirming that every date he has was consensual and enjoyable by sending a complimentary message to himself from their phone to use as evidence. Which not only protects him from any potential backlash from one of his borderline encounters, but also allows him to live in a delusional bubble, as when he looks back at the messages from any of the women he's harmed, he sees nothing but positive feedback. So now that we've worked our way through Dennis Reynolds' seedy manipulations, you've probably concluded that he's a sociopath. Someone who deserves to have his face plastered all over the city to warn women and even men against people like him. But there's tragically an even darker side to Dennis that only occasionally bubbles to the surface. When his ex-wife died and he was a prime suspect, Dennis stated that while he didn't kill her, he was glad she was dead, which shows us that once he's done with someone and ghosts them, he literally doesn't care what happens to them after that. He doesn't value human life at all, completely disconnected from anything even resembling empathy. We see this again when he manipulatively lures Cricket into a trap by promising him his love Dee will be there, just so he and Mac can hunt him down like an animal for sport. Then when he and Dee want to get into the mind of a serial killer to solve a case, he wants to reenact the stalking and capture process so much that he's actually disappointed that he won't be able to go all the way and kill her, as it just won't be as fun. This is because Dennis loves to lose himself in any character he plays, no matter how dark it gets, as he doesn't suffer the burden of a moral compass. In fact, hiding behind a false identity only enables him to behave even more sadistically, as it finally frees him from the shackles of consequence.
This is about the thrill of wearing another man's skin, feeling his innermost wants and desires.
So if It's Always Sunny has taught us anything, it's that appearances can be deceiving. As despite being a character in a sitcom, Dennis Reynolds is actually one of the darkest representations of a narcissistic predator ever committed to the screen. A manipulative empty shell of a man who takes advantage of the optimism of others to feed his insatiable need for validation. And while he may not be a serial killer yet, if he were to ever cross that line, it wouldn't seem out of place. It would seem more like an inevitability. As for someone with such powerful delusions of grandeur, coupled with a crippling fear of rejection, need for control, and total lack of anything even resembling remorse, it feels like only a matter of time before he snaps, and wants to test his manipulative credentials on a much larger scale with much higher stakes. As perhaps then he would finally get the recognition and attention he's always believed he deserves. Well, if you've made it this far, firstly, thank you for watching, but if you could now give the video a like, possibly even leave a comment and click on that subscribe button, it will encourage that mysterious algorithm to do its thing.